Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of CPAC Live. Today, we're joined by somebody you know and like and saw at CPAC, Scott Presler, with hashtag The Persistence. Scott, thanks for being with us again.
Oh, happy to. Thanks for having me.
I say again because you've been with us at CPAC, but this is your first time on this new show. Tell us what you have been doing during whatever we call this quarantine, shutdown, whatever the government is doing to us at this moment.
Well, shockingly, if you can believe it, my hair was not this long when we began the quarantine. It was
Did
up
you
here.
have a
No, I'm
buzz
just kidding.
cut? Well, what did you have? You bald? I can't remember.
Nobody gets a haircut, but no, I have not spent this quarantine twiddling my thumbs. I'm laser focused on helping to make sure that conservatives are winning in November up and down the ballot. And I've also been continuing my work helping to clean up cities across America. During this time, I've been to Atlanta, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and the next 3 months are already set and booked to go. So I'm going full steam ahead.
So you've been flying or driving?
I've been driving, but I will be flying to Denver, Colorado this Saturday. So I'll have my mask, I'll have some antibacterial, I'll be good to go.
Yeah, that's great. And so what are you doing when you get to these cities? What's your game plan as so many things in society have changed over the course of the last 2 months? Since CPAC, think about it.
Yeah.
We learned about this one case at CPAC a week after, and it seems like the whole world's gone mad.
Well, I'm doing this for a couple different reasons. Number one, when we come to these cities, I, of course, maintain social distancing and making sure that I'm protecting everybody's health. But what I want to bring is positivity to these cities, and I want to bring love. I always say that my motto is stop talking, start doing. And I believe the best way to show love is through your actions, not words. So when I go into these cities that have been neglected for years, I just want to show people that we give a darn and that we're willing to pull up our boots and our sleeves and get dirty and do it because it's the right thing to do.
So basically, you're going into these cities that liberals run, and they talk a good game about how they care about all these people, but their policies actually harm people. So instead of just saying that the liberals are wrong, you're going on the ground and showing the people who are suffering in these conditions that you care and you try to help. It starts with cleaning up the streets, right?
Well, and I have to give credit where credit is due. President Trump was the one that brought national attention to the city of Baltimore. And he talked about, bless his heart, the late Representative Cummings, and how the 7th district has just been neglected and we'll say needs love and attention. And, I saw on Twitter that everybody was pointing the finger and they were trying to blame and they were trying to scapegoat. And I thought to myself, why is nobody actually trying to do something to solve the problem? And so that's where I come in. I'm just tired of people talking. I want them to actually create solutions to the problems in our society.
So last night, against the advice from people I was with, a small group of us went down, and we obviously were incognito, but we went into the protests right there in Lafayette Park.
Wow.
It's a troubling time for America. When you shut down society, when you shut down churches, when you tell young people they can't safely go to school, it has this terrible effect. Now, I think these protests are being orchestrated by a lot of hateful leftists, but there's also a lot of people that have just, it's bubbling up in bad ways. What's your take on what's going on in the streets of Washington, D.C. and so many of these big cities across the country?
Well, I have to say that I understand people's grief and I understand their anger and I understand their frustration because I feel it too. I'm very angry, but I'm directing my anger into action, and not just action, but I believe positive action. And, while I understand the George Floyd protest and what happened to him was unjustified, unjust, wrong, I think that we can continue to find positive ways that we can make sure that what happened to George Floyd never happens again. And, I want to say very clearly, I am a Republican who does believe that Black Lives Matter. I do. But one thing that I cannot justify or agree with is how these riots are burning down Black-owned businesses. You know, if you care about the Black community, then let's build the Black community up, not tear their cities down.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that, at the beginning of the protests, it did seem like it was a lot of young people, a lot of local people. And I don't know, as the evening went on, it just felt like it was getting more and more like a rallying cry for radicalized people. And I want to speak directly to this question about whose lives matter. What we're seeing with a lot of these arrests and such is it's not people who live in the community who are doing the most hateful violence, including burning,
Yes.
trying to burn down, ironically, CNN, the AFL-CIO. It's not people in those communities. It's outsiders who just want to sow chaos.
Absolutely. Well, I have to ask you, Matt, what were you wearing last night incognito? Were you dressed out, decked all black? I'm really curious.
I tried because we actually were at someone else's home, and I tried to do the best I could with some clothes I had in the car. I had on a white shirt with French cuffs, khaki pants, and a Notre Dame baseball cap turned backwards, and I walked out, and everybody laughed at me. So I had to borrow some clothes. So I had, your full-on hoodie, bandana. The only thing I couldn't fix was I had some nice shoes on, which didn't really blend in very well. But I think our group, we did blend in very well. No one really jostled us, but it was when you're right in the middle of something like that, you could feel the hate. It wasn't a feeling of, and we went with Reverend Pat Mahoney, who's been leading our Protestant prayer services. Sometimes you're in the midst of a protest, like when we were in Hong Kong, and you can feel like the camaraderie and like you're in a bigger cause. Last night just felt like there was a lot of drugs, a lot of marijuana, just reeked of it, and just people up to no good. And I agree with you. I think George Floyd's death is a tragedy. It's really an American tragedy, and it cries out for justice. I think that the bad cops, of which 99.9% of cops aren't, will get the book thrown at them. But why did I have to walk by last night as graffiti is being literally sprayed on all these great memorials and statues around our nation's capital? And I have to ask, where were the police? I saw the Secret Service. I walked right up to the line, the phalanx there at the White House. But where are the cops in these cities?
Yeah. Well, the one thing that I will say, I think the silver lining is, every night there seems to be this horrible rioting going on, and, we see cities burning. But then I wake up the next morning and I see wonderful people in Minneapolis and Chicago and Sacramento, and they're out cleaning up their communities the next morning. So
I wonder, Scott, and I'm not blaming the police in this, but it's like I'm disappointed in these big city mayors that they're allowing all the lawlessness. I think it's great that the people are good-hearted and they clean up afterwards. I saw the graffiti being sprayed off the World War II memorial. I'm glad those things can be saved, but I actually think we need an ounce of prevention here.
Oh, sure. Well, I think President Trump is, they always talk about the left not being dictatorial and not being authoritarian. President Trump right now is letting federalism play out. He's not taking the role of mayors and governors and doing their job for them. He's saying, look, you need to step up and take responsibility and be accountable for your constituents. And I think you're right. We have seen a failure and a dereliction of duty by our mayors in cities across the country.
Scott, do you think that one of the upshots from your work, other people's good work, the fact that President Trump seems to be very appealing and his policies seem to be very appealing, if you look at polls and minority support, especially in the African-American community, do you think after all of these riots and everything that the people in those communities who you care about, who we care about, do you think there's a chance that they'll be even more open to some of our philosophy and our policy proposals?
I do. Absolutely. But we have to show up. See, right now, these rioters, what they're doing is they're actually planting seeds, whether they know it or not. They're planting seeds of doubt. I just had a woman message me yesterday on my Facebook, And she said, Scott, I've been a liberal my whole life, and I'm having this crisis right now because everything that I've been taught my entire life has just been a lie. And now she's considering the conservative movement. So these seeds have been planted of doubt in the left's mind. Now we have to come in and show them why we have all of these great policies of less government and independence and lower taxes and freedom. I'm a Republican because I am a freedom fighter. I want people to be able to live their lives without the government telling them what they can and cannot do. So we have to go into these communities. We need to be in Minneapolis and Chicago and Atlanta and Houston and Miami and preach conservatism to them.
So we had a very ambitious schedule planned right after CPAC. So we were going right into March. Then the whole Chinese Corona thing hit. And we've been in abeyance here. And it sounds like your advice to those of us at CPAC is get back on the road.
Yes.
Go engage in these communities. Don't go just to the comfortable suburbs that are Republican lined, but go everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. We need to go to the Black community, the Hispanic community, veteran community, Asian community, gay community, Jewish community. We need to be everywhere and leave no stone unturned going into the 2020 election. I mean, look at me. You're talking to a long-haired millennial hippie who travels the country registering voters and cleaning up trash. This is a new Republican Party that is inclusive and accepting.
Okay, so now you got me curious. What do you drive when you go to these cities? Do you drive a Prius?
I'm not in a Prius.
Okay.
Unfortunately, my wonderful 2012 Mazda 3 was totaled, unfortunately, by a teenager last year. So I've upgraded to a previously owned CRV. So I'm now an SUV guy.
That's awesome. That's great. I just wanted to make sure. I could just see in that VW, van. People my age will know what I mean when I say that, but the young people won't know what I'm talking about. But I think this is a great message, and America's really crying out for help. And it's not just inner city people. It's not just immigrants, minorities. It's also, I think, just Americans generally. I think we want our kids to go back to school. My kids want to go back to school. They're tired of being told by the government that everything's not safe and you got to wait till everything is 100% safe. I don't think anything's ever 100% safe, and we got to get back to normal.
Absolutely. Well, notice the news, with all due respect, is no longer talking about COVID-19. And look at all of these cities. The very people that were lambasting people like you and me for wanting to go out shopping at the supermarket are now packed closely together like sardines, potentially spreading COVID everywhere. But no, that's not in the news. They're not talking about the potential health risks anymore. All of that is out the window. So yes, my suggestion very humbly to CPAC and other conservative activists like myself is it's time to get back to work. And let me tell you, my entire schedule for the next 3 months is booked solid. I'm going to Columbus and Orange and San Diego and Ventura and LA. I'm going to Kent, Ohio and Jacksonville, Florida. So I'm not stopping or slowing down for a gosh dang second.
Can we go with you to at least one of those trips?
Absolutely.
Okay, it's a deal. Scott Presler, we appreciate you being with us. How can our audience track your wonderful work?
Thank you. You can follow me at Twitter at Scott Presler. There's only one S in Presler. You can also go to my website, scottpresler.org. Again, only one S. And I'm also on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. I'm on everything.
Awesome. Scott Presler, thanks for being with us on CPAC Live. And everybody stay tuned and watch this important message from our Attorney General, Bill Barr. And we'll be right back on the other side with a great, great public servant and lawyer, Matt Whitaker, former acting Attorney General of the United States.
These are unprecedented burdens on civil liberties right now. The idea that you have to stay in your house is disturbingly close to house arrest. We're looking carefully at a number of these rules that are being put into place, and if we think one goes too far, we initially try to jawbone the governors into rolling them back or adjusting them, and if they're not and people bring lawsuits, we file statement of interest and side with the plaintiffs.
Welcome back to CPAC Live. It's great to hear from one Attorney General, Bill Barr, and another former Attorney General, Matt Whitaker, who's with us now. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing great. How are you, Matt?
I'm doing great. How are the book sales going? We're all excited about the launch. We can actually buy your new book, Above the Law.
Yeah, it came out, 2 weeks ago tomorrow, and it was well received. And, even the folks on the left had to admit it was well written and well referenced, even though they disagreed with about every piece of its content. But, I wrote the book to really tell my story for the time that I was at the Department of Justice, and also have a historically accurate description of what happened, especially related to the Mueller probe and all of the challenges that we faced at the FBI and DOJ. And I think Americans are going to learn sort of how to make sure it never happens again. And I lay out that as well.
So Rod Rosenstein, someone you know well, will be testifying in front of Lindsey Graham's committee, I believe.
Wednesday. Yep.
What are we to think about this?
I think this is a great first step. I think there are many questions that the former Deputy Attorney General can answer. I expect that he will answer them, and I think it's going to resolve some of these questions we have about the origins of the Mueller investigation, the Crossfire Hurricane, the counterintelligence investigation into the Trump campaign. He was there and made the decision to appoint the special counsel. I think that is going to be obviously dominate a lot of the hearing.
Not just appoint a special counsel, but the particular special counsel, right?
Yes, he's the one that's selected. Yeah, and I think there's also a real question that there's no doubt that Bob Mueller was interviewing to be the next FBI director. There was also no doubt that he was not going to be selected, and Chris Wray was going to be selected. And suddenly, in the middle of that process, he was appointed special counsel. And so, I think all these questions are unique to the former Deputy Attorney General. I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say. In the book, I outline several questions that I think he needs to, and only he can answer. So, it's certainly going to be must-watch TV for a lot of us.
Let me go back to this Bob Mueller question. It's really interesting. I remember learning throughout this process that Bob Mueller was a member of then citizen Donald Trump's golf facility in Northern Virginia. And they had a financial disagreement because apparently Bob Mueller didn't want to be a member anymore, and he wanted to pull out his equity, his money, out of his membership, and he wasn't allowed to do that. So not only was he someone that seemed to want to protect the FBI and its malfeasance and wrongdoing at any cost, he also had a personal gripe against the president, which set up this terrible situation. And Rosenstein, did he not also approve one of these extensions of the FISA warrant?
Yeah, there are a couple things that folks have pointed to. And again, I hope that the deputy talks about this on Wednesday. Both he signed the third renewal for the Carter Page FISA, which was the fourth application to continue to spy on Carter Page and all that involved. But, he's also the one that recommended the firing of Jim Comey, and the basis, his memo was the basis that the president used to fire Jim Comey. And ultimately, if you read part 2 of the Mueller report, the firing of Jim Comey was relevant to their case, their, kind of weak and unsubstantiated attempted obstruction of justice case, which that's one of the things that, sort of is the most frightening thing for me personally and others that found themselves sort of caught up in this situation is, they knew that there was no evidence of collusion between anybody on the campaign and the Russian government. What it ended up becoming and continuing to be, as Devin Nunes has pointed out, and he wrote the introduction to my book, is an obstruction of justice trap. So that if anybody would have done anything to affect the investigation, they had protected themselves with this kind of theory of obstruction of justice, which again, it is. We got to make sure this doesn't happen again, Matt, because it was, you were familiar and watching it very closely, I know, and it's. I'm glad it's behind us, but it was a very damaging time, to live through.
But I agree with you. It's a guaranteed slam dunk. It's going to happen again or something like it unless somebody is held accountable to this illegal activity. And it can't just be in this case, it just can't be a political reprimand. I think Democrats have to go through the legal process just like Republicans seem to have to constantly. Else we just get it again. Mr. Attorney General, I should be saying, we just heard just before you joined us from Bill Barr, who, in my estimation, is doing a great job. What's your take on the shutting down churches, telling people what they can and can't do, owners, mayors just trying to run our lives? What's your take on all this?
Yeah, it's inconsistent with our values and our foundational principles that started this republic over 200 years ago. There is no pandemic exception to our liberties. And, if you can successfully socially distance at a supermarket, then there's no reason you can't do the same things, and the same people can do the same things at a church service. And I think, now more than ever, I know you've been outspoken on this, Matt, and I appreciate your voice on this because, now more than ever, we need faith. We need religion. We need to heal our land. And I think, by coming together as a foundational and traditionally Christian nation, obviously leaning into our faith is going to be so important. And, these anarchists on our streets in the middle of the night that are not only causing chaos, but also, stoking fear and trying to undermine our system of law and order and an organized and, effective economy just cannot be stood for. We need to make sure that these mayors, that these governors, especially in blue states and blue cities, are willing to use every tool in their tool belt. And that would be including activating the National Guard and to support law enforcement. And I see a lot of these, especially governors, in these states, because of their budget problems, because they've overspent and they don't have the resources to do their job. They're afraid to fully engage the National Guard and pay for those folks to do the job that's so important. Because this is we're gonna recover and we're gonna be better for this, and we're gonna make sure that this disruption to our kind of law and order system is not tolerated. Listen, we all agree that what we saw on the video of George Floyd is reprehensible. It should be condemned. Those officers obviously are going to be brought to justice, and we've got to make sure that our police officers are respectful to every citizen, and treat them with the same, no matter their skin color, no matter where they're come from, no matter what city they find themselves in. But at the same time, that does not, this response of the anarchy and the breaking of windows and the setting of things on fire, including businesses and churches, just cannot be tolerated either. And so we have to get the bad apples out of our police departments that do not follow the rules and regulations. But at the same time, we need to get these anarchists out too.
I think it's interesting how the president has said, there's dirty cops at the FBI. Well, you have this question about, is the FBI, is it a good thing or a bad thing in society? Is it a salvageable institution? Well, I think I would say 99.9% of the men and women of the FBI serve with honor, uphold their oaths, don't use politics to make the decisions they have to do their job. You can't condemn the FBI as a whole. You got to go after the bad cops. You got to go after the people like Jim Comey and McCabe, and unfortunately, I could keep going because it's a long list.
And three, those are both on the cover of my book, and so is Peter Strzok. There are identifiable people that led the FBI astray. But you're right, the men and women at the FBI, by a large majority, are hardworking, dedicated public servants. And
disgusted by what their leadership is.
They are.
It's sad that the cream didn't rise to the top, but the rot rised to the top. But the same thing is true for this officer. I don't know if you would say this, but I've been the victim of bad policing. There are policemen and women who make mistakes, and there's also policemen who are just bad people, and they like to be a little too aggressive with people. But once again, I find that to be the exception and not the rule. And we all know that it's human beings doing these jobs. And what I saw in that videotape, I couldn't even watch it more than once because it's almost like a 9/11 moment. I don't want to watch those towers come down. It's too jarring. I couldn't watch what happened to Mr. Floyd. But to use that as an excuse to burn down Washington, D.C., that's insane. We can't let it happen.
No, we can't let it happen. And clearly there, the Floyd situation, which, every person in America of goodwill and sound judgment condemns it, says this shouldn't happen. People should be held accountable. The justification, though, to then see what we see happening in a lot of major cities is, it's not in proportion to what happened, because, the MPD here in Washington, D.C., had nothing to do with what happened to Mr. Floyd. And so, I know there's a lot of frustration. I know there's a lot of, in our minority communities that believe that, the police don't have their best interests at heart. And that's a cultural thing that we need to change. But, it's also political leadership. I look at these major cities that, sort of where this frustration is among the minority communities. And by and large, if not completely, they're run by Democrats and the left. And, where is the political accountability? Because this is what I often said, I was, watched very carefully. And when I was at DOJ the second time, Chicago and Mayor Emanuel and their police chief, had some real struggles. And the police kind of oftentimes, while people were getting shot, dozens at a time on weekends, their police kind of stood down because of the political leadership failure. And, the solution is not to put in some, monitor that takes the political responsibility off the mayor and puts it on some, kind of star chamber of former federal judges. We have to, the folks in these communities that are frustrated have to understand the failure is the mayor and the city council,
right,
who have not done their jobs to make sure the police are well trained and are the best of the best, because that is a tough job to be in law enforcement. But it's also, we are so lucky that people still are willing to do it, even as hard as it is. And we need to encourage people to continue to go into law enforcement, because we do need good people to be police and sheriff's deputies.
I also think there's great hypocrisy here. They've been telling us for 2 months that it's our first responders, our brave first responders, who are going to get us through this Chinese corona crisis. And I don't disagree with that statement. The doctors, the nurses, the emergency technicians, the ambulance folks, the fire, rescue, cops, everyone, right? I'm sure I've left tons out.
Yeah.
But they were acting heroically, but they just turned on a dime because one cop did a very evil and tragic thing, something it's hard for me to even relate to. It's so violent, so wrong. But
right.
But because that happened, now they flipped the card. We were told we would put these first responders' health in danger if we didn't do everything they told us. And now, 2 months later, they're telling us that the cops, the first responders, are evil. And what I saw on the streets last night were all these signs, slang terms about the cops being spray painted on memorials and statues in our public spaces.
Supreme Court, yep.
Yeah, and Supreme Court, that's right. And this is happening all over the city, all over the country. Is there something good that's going to come out of all this, Matt?
Yeah, so there will be, but it's going to take leadership, and it's going to take leadership really at all levels. Obviously, the law and order is what most Americans want. The large majority of Americans want to be safe in their homes, want to have their children be able to play in the front yard, and it's really, sort of the pursuit of happiness is what is guaranteed, sort of in the foundational premise of our country. And liberties, including our religious liberties. And again, we need everyone.
I just want you to know, General Whitaker, I am not pursuing happiness when I have a lock on my front door and a lock on the front door of my church. I'm not happy.
Yeah, I understand that. But along the same lines, let's also, the media loves to sow division, loves to show these rioters 24/7. But I took a lot of heart and was made me smile to see people with brooms and dustpans showing up Saturday in Minneapolis and other cities doing their work. I saw a picture today. I think Sean Spicer posted a picture of a gentleman that was power washing the Supreme Court. And it's those kind of people that quietly go about their job, cleaning up the mess. And I think a lot of us, that are law and order, that want to see America succeed, for centuries to come and be the dominant superpower, know the recipe, and that is that we need people to be law-abiding citizens. We need government to do its role, especially in the law enforcement place, as long as all these other places we ask the government, and we pay a lot of money in taxes to make sure that these roles are fulfilled. And we just got to make sure that these rioters, these people that cause chaos and sow violence, are brought to justice. And this is one of the things I was excited you mentioned, Bill Barr. I mean, naming Antifa as a terrorist organization and doing a fundamental investigation of that movement, I think that's a good place to start. There are other groups.
Great place to start. It's a great place to start. I can't agree with you more. The other step, which you didn't have control over, but you did some really great things on the college campuses, is we also got to stop teaching our kids that America is a force for evil, that it's bad, and that it's fundamentally racist. We have to end that. That has to stop, because what I saw on the streets last night is a bunch of young people who hate this country. And it does make you want to say, how did they get to this place where they hate America, and why are they here? If you hate America so much, I know America is big enough and broad enough to have freedom of speech and to even have radicalized speech as a part of that. I get that. But we've got to stop having the schools have a curriculum that doesn't make these kids give them a chance to understand the wonderful and unique beauty of the American experience.
Right. And I think one of the things is look at who's leading and who's going to come up with the solution to coronavirus. It's going to be American companies and American innovation. The Chinese are actively trying to steal and break into that research because they can't do it themselves. We're going to save the world from eventually from the coronavirus long term. You look at what America has done in the world wars and in a lot, where we have given blood and treasure to a lot of places to not only defeat communism and defeat socialism, but also to have a free Europe and we've spent a lot of time and obvious attention in the Middle East as well. Combating Al Qaeda, combating all of the terrorist organizations that get a foothold in the chaos in the Middle East. And so America is going to continue to be a force for good. And I think we need to all lean into not only our faith, but I think obviously as a big fan of the president, I think we continue to just do everything we can to pray for him and so that he has the wisdom to lead this country and regrow our economy like he did the first time, and kind of quell the chaos and anarchy so that we can have a peaceful nation.
Yeah, it took a bunch of leftists, socialists, anarchists, whatever they call themselves, to remind people why presidential leadership matters, why we should respect cops, and why we should be cherishing our cities and not burning them down. So it's an interesting political time. And former acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker, we appreciate your friendship, everything you've done for CPAC. We want to get back on the road here soon. We'd like you to join us. Would you become a groupie with us?
Absolutely.
Come on.
I would encourage everyone to, if they're looking for a good summer read, go out and get the book Above the Law. Anything. I'm a big fan of ACU. I'll plan on to be at every CPAC you invite me to, and I look forward to the continued friendship that we have and that many on your team I share with them.
Thank you, General Whitaker, and thank you everyone for participating in another great CPAC live show. We'll be back at you on Wednesday, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Go to our website at conservative.org and join this conversation. Thank you so much and have a great day.